Since my last video had so much response, I thought you guys may be interested in the documentary of me building my E30 M20 Turbo. In this video, I will show you the full build in every little detail. I documented every single part that I bought, every dollar that I spent, all the mistakes that I made, and of course the fun part when the engine was finally done and the car was ready to drive. So lean back and enjoy the full story. Welcome to the year 2017, back then when I was 24, young and dumb, but full of energy and motivation. I had bought this car 5 years ago as a complete scrap and had visions nobody could understand. After I had accomplished my goal bringing this car back to life, it was time to move on to the next step, the turbo conversion. Now, I just want to excuse myself in advance for the bad footage because most of it was captured with an iPhone 6 and a GoPro Hero 3. I focused more on making this video informative than entertaining, so I hope you forgive me. This was the last footage before putting on the turbo. My engine was a solid M20 B27 from the E30, but with the 325i technique on top.
Ich bin Futtern von den Street Markers und hier ist das Video.
I finally had some money together and was ready to order the first parts. According to my first calculations, a budget of 5,000 euros should have been enough, especially because I wanted to stay stock block and didn't want to touch any internal parts of the engine. So after the first parts arrived, I didn't waste any time and directly started the job. I was mainly ahead in time with my job on this build. The only thing holding me back was the arrival of parts that I needed. That is the reason why the order of things that I'll be doing is so messed up. The ECU that I got is mainly a plug-and-play Mega Squirt from KDFI, which is built plug-and-play. This one cost me about 500 euros back then. And although don't worry about the amounts of money too much, I will be breaking them up later on this video after I got everything together. My E30 used to be a 320i catalyst in origin, and I only had converted the engine itself to the E30 with the 325i top. So together with going turbo, I needed to strengthen some things up like the transmission. I didn't do anything crazy big here. I only completed the conversion by putting in the matching 325i transmission in, manual of course. The next step was to get the engine out. In theory, you could be doing this conversion without removing the engine from the car, but it makes it a lot easier to work on. And also I didn't have a car lift and had to put the car on jacks, so I had to remove the engine from the upper side. First I was afraid how this is going to work out, because I was taking the engine out together with the transmission, but you're going to see that it worked out pretty good. The engine lift that I got from eBay cost me only 200 euros and was definitely worth its money. That one is still in use in my commercial workshop, which I opened up later in 2019. Fortunately, I got rid of it in the year 2025, which is the reason why I finally have time again to work on my projects like the E30 or keeping this YouTube channel alive. And yeah, I had a lot of company back then while I was working on this build. Because this kind of build was nothing you would see every day here in Austria. So guys, thank you for your support back then, especially for bringing company. This definitely helped me speed things up. Now that the engine was hanging free, the transmission was very easy to remove. Otherwise these bolts would be sitting in a very uncomfy position. After I freed my way up to the engine mounts, I transferred the engine to an engine stand. This one only cost me about 60 euros. In this part nothing crazy is happening, just some basic removal of parts. I had some spare time left for the parts to arrive, so I wanted to use this opportunity to get the engine free of all the oil mud and dirt that has been built over all these years. And then finally the first interesting thing was coming up, removing the cylinder head. I was very curious to see how the cylinders would be looking. People always were telling that the cast iron blocks are undestroyable, but now it was time to see if that was true. And surprisingly, it turned out that everything was even better than I could even expect. There was no signs of wear and you could even still see the honing marks. Now call me dumb or whatever you want, but after seeing how well this engine was looking and the fact that the engine was running just fine as it was, here I decided to leave the block completely untouched. One reason was because I didn't want to touch a running system and also because I wanted to stay in the budget under 5,000 euros. 9 years later I can say that that was a good decision, because I never experienced any issues on the block till now.
Jo, hier haben wir das gute Ding.
And then my turbo kit had finally arrived. I bought this from Laurent Motors in France. The kit included such basic things like the turbo, the exhaust manifold, 440 CCM injectors, intercooler and piping, blow-off valve, oil lines, wastegate controller and stuff like that. This kit had cost around 1,700 euros as I remember. Now later on I can tell you it would have been cheaper to order the parts separately because there was a lot of shit included which I had to upgrade later on anyway.
Whoops.
I was still waiting for parts to arrive for the engine like the cylinder head gasket and ARP studs, so I used this time for other things like fitting the intercooler. I wanted to fit the intercooler behind this ventilation that is originally made for the oil cooler and the AC radiator. This way I could make a stealth look where the car was not shouting that it had a turbocharger. Now, my car had no AC, that's why I had to cut out this ventilation hole. To hold the intercooler in place, I used some basic flat metal pieces which you can get in any hardware store. And also by using this space for the intercooler, that meant that I had to relocate the oil cooler. I decided to order an aftermarket one instead. And now it was time to inspect the engine for the last time, so I could order any missing parts to not lose any time later again.
Okay. Hier sieht man ganz leichte Riefen in Längsrichtung, aber man spürt sie nicht mit dem Finger, das ist ganz wichtig. So sieht es halt auf allen 6 Zylindern aus. Never touch a running system.
Here I am explaining why I already had an adjustable camshaft sprocket. You need it if the distance between the camshaft and the crankshaft changes. Like in example, if you resurface the cylinder head or the bottom block, so you can readjust the change in distance back. Now, this was the price list that I made back then in 2017. For the ones who are interested, I will leave this in so you can see how cheap that stuff was back then compared to the prices now after inflation. For the other ones, I'm bringing you the real breakdown later on the video, so you can see how much everything costed at the end when I was really finished. I can only tell you that my budget of 5,000 euros was not so bad planned. I think I came to about 5,500 euros to get the car ready to drive. But later I had to do some improvements which let that budget explode completely, but more on that later. Okay, let's continue building the engine. Now it was time for the oil return line. I decided to put the return line into this position. Normally you should not use a place where the oil is standing, but the return line was coming from such big height and it was so big in diameter that I thought there should be no issue, and it never has been for all that years. And finally my copper ring gasket and the ARP head studs had arrived, so it was time to fit them in. This was the only thing that I upgraded on the engine, and this gasket together with the ARP studs have never failed until today. And here I want to mention that I'm a big fan of launch controls and flames. The only thing that nobody told me was that it was necessary to retighten the studs after some heat cycles. I did that once when I was resealing the valve cover, and it was definitely necessary because some nuts felt very loose. Sorry that I skipped that part where I tightened up the studs, but basically I only did what it said in the instructions. Now finally it was time to fit the turbo on the engine. Now I had to disassemble the turbo housing to get the direction of some parts right. I had to adjust the boost side to match the direction of the boost pipes, and also I had to adjust the lubrication housing to fit the direction of the oil lines. At first I was very afraid to disassemble this, but to be honest it was no big deal at all. Here is really no special thing that you could break by disassembling it. I disassembled the boost side housing completely, because of the wastegate. On the exhaust side I only loosened up the screws, so I could turn the lubrication housing to the right direction. And of course, this would be no real build if I wouldn't mount some shiny parts on it.
Oh. Ah. Perfect, man! Geil! Bitches! Oh, nije. Oh.
This is some of that what I meant that I had to buy twice. These were some boost pipes that I ordered especially for how I wanted the boost piping to be. And also I needed some reducing pieces to fit the throttle body as well like the turbo outlet. I fitted these U-shaped pipings in here to get the piping through already open places. By this way it was possible to place them without cutting anything on the car.
Jetzt werden wir den Zahnriemen auflegen.
The next step was to put the timing belt on. Here I marked the origin position of the camshaft on the inside aluminium piece. This one has to match up with the marking on the cylinder head. The outer marking on the teeth is the one which is going to move, because I used the thicker head gasket from Athena with the copper rings.
Die zwei schwarzen überkreuzen sich.
After that I put on the housings and covers back on and put it back together with the ignition distributor. I changed the system later to a wasted spark setup, but let's stay on this one for now. Now I will show you my first steps I had to do on the oil distribution system. First of all, I had to use the original oil cooler adapter just to get the oil filter looking sideways. Otherwise, there was not enough room because of the exhaust manifold. To get the adapter working as only an adapter, I removed the thermostat just to be sure that the oil was moving. To block the original oil feed lines, I used two oil drain plugs which were originally made for older model Ford cars. And after that 90-degree piece, I used the universal sandwich plate to connect the following stuff. These two lines are going to the aftermarket oil cooler I put in there. This one is a oil pressure and this is a temperature feeler. Between here I'm taking the feed line to my turbo, which is going like somewhere here up there. Now let's talk about the clutch. I used a stage 2 upgrade clutch from Sachs, which I ordered from Shaper Automotive. The bad news is they don't sell this anymore. This one was an organic plate made for up to 550 Nm of power, which is pretty nice because you can still drive the car very smooth with this. And I also think this one protects the drivetrain much better because it's not punching the gears in so hard. This may be one of the reasons why I never had issues on my drivetrain till today. Let's go to the part nobody will give you good advice about on the internet, the throttle body. Now, after I wanted to stay budget friendly and didn't want to be messing around with electrical throttle bodies, I found a way to make the genuine throttle body work with this build. First of all, I needed to get rid of all the openings I didn't need anymore. That was like the idle control valve and the crankshaft ventilation. I closed up these holes by using 2-component metal modeling clay. There was still work needed to be done on the throttle position sensor, but I figured that one out later, because at first I didn't know this was going to be a problem. As you can see, the basic stuff that was needed to be done to get the turbo on didn't need any witchcraft. So finally it was time to set the engine back in position. I think here it has been about 5 to 6 weeks since I started the project. And of course, this meant it was party time. And now it was time to put the last puzzle pieces together to get the engine started for the first time. Thanks to my plug-and-play ECU, there was already a base tune set up for the E30, so I only had to do some minor adjustments to get the engine started for the first time. The aftermarket oil cooler went straight on top of the intercooler. I connected this one also with a flat metal as I did on the bottom of the intercooler. And then I connected the throttle cable.
An die alten Kerzen, ZGR 5A. Und das sind jetzt die neuen NGKR. TFR 6B, sind ziemlich gleich.
The basic things were finally connected, and so I could connect the ECU with my netbook for the first time. And as I already told you, I'm a big fan of launch control and big bangs, so I directly had to check this out before doing anything other. I pre-filled the oil cooler and the turbo with oil, and then of course the engine. The oil that I'm using is a 10W60, which is normally used on M engines. If you ask me today, I would be using some thinner oil like 5W50, because the 1060 is a little too thick in my opinion.
So, ich werde ihn jetzt nur durchhageln, um zu sehen, ob er Öldruck aufbaut. Gut, das heißt, wir haben genug Öldruck. Wir können jetzt mal den ersten Startversuch machen. Take one. Wir starten jetzt das erste Mal. Er läuft! das.
Yeah, I know the engine wasn't running right, but I was so surprised and happy that the engine at least was giving signs of life and was not making any unhealthy sounds. Okay, enough partying for now. There was still a ton full of work needed to be done before this car was ready to drive. So let's go. I used the original 325i radiator which was made for the tropical areas and combined it with this electrical fan. Don't let yourself distract from you that it's a small size. It was doing its job pretty good. I never had troubles cooling the engine down. The bigger problem was cooling the engine bay and the area around the turbo. Because of that, I later switched back to the visco fan, which is definitely the better option for this build. Here's a little trick that I'm using to get the air out of the cooling system. This works fine on almost every engine. After getting the engine to operating temperature, I could make some adjustments on the ECU to get the engine running smoother. Alright, now it was time to go on to the drivetrain. I used this opportunity to overhaul some of the parts, like the flex disc, the middle driveshaft bearing and the gear linkage. I upgraded the driveshaft to one from a 324 diesel version, and the flex disc that I used was the normal original style one. This one was also enough to handle the power till today. Okay, now when I was trying to tune the engine, I noticed that the engine shut off every time I got on the throttle a little harder. Then I found out that the original throttle position sensor was making a short circuit to the ECU, and that was the reason why it went on limp mode. To get rid of this problem, I bought a TPS from an M50 engine and crafted it onto the old M20 sensor to get it working with the M20 throttle body.
So, das ist jetzt die Adapterplattenkonstruktion, die ich selbst gebaut habe. Sie wird wohl hoffentlich ihren Zweck erfüllen. Ich habe vorhin an einem Übungsstück das Ganze gemacht, der war schon defekt, der war abgebrochen. Ich musste hier glatt schleifen, das sieht man hier. Also damit die Dichtflächen wieder aneinander passen. Der Stecker passt 1:1. Bevor ich das zusammenbaue, werde ich noch zuerst das Steuergerät testen, ob das mit dem funktioniert. Also ich bin jetzt ziemlich gespannt, weil im Internet sagten viele, man muss den Kabelbaum ändern. Das Problem war aber bei mir, der originale Schalter, der drauf war, hat mit dem Megasquirt nicht funktioniert. Deswegen könnte es sein, dass sie vielleicht bereits für den M50-Stecker vorprogrammiert ist. Also das ist der Drosselklappenschalter. Ja, es funktioniert. Und los.
To get some cold air intake, I bought this flexible pipe to get the air filter under the car. Later on, I switched this one with my second turbo to get some better flutter and avoid water getting splashed onto the filter. And then I needed a temperature sensor for the intake air, which I positioned here. I used the temperature sensor again out of an M50. The plug that I'm using here is the old plug from the vent valve, which is meant for the fuel tank ventilation. I also deleted that vent completely, because I used that output under the throttle body to connect the boost pressure sensor on the ECU. To get the intake temperature sensor working, I had to take the cables of pin 1 and pin 4 from the airflow meter plug. Excuse me, but I had to get the launch control working for my first ride. So I got a clash sensor from a Ford which I had laying around and crafted myself this construction to get it working.
Perfekt. Wir schalten die Kupplung auf den Pin JS2 und die andere Seite vom Kabel muss Masse geschaltet werden.
It was time for the last pieces and touches before it was finally ready to go on the road for the first time.
Damn it!
Time to get the base setup a little bit better so I could test if this thing works under boost. I had a date later on with a tuner which was pretty far away from my home, so I didn't want to be having issues when I was out there. Here at first I had issues getting the boost controller set up. This is the overboost protection cutting the power every time I hit too much boost. Now, we were already having a lot of fun with this thing being on base tune. Later that night I met the tuner guy which has set my system right, and this was the final result.
Getcha.
Okay, let's break down the costs that I spent on this car until the stage you just have seen, and later I will tell you the full cost that I spent after all this year standing today. So let's dive in. Now I have two rows of prices, the ones are 2017 and the other ones are 2026. But I'm only gonna tell you the 2017 ones, you can see the 2026 ones if you wanna know. So the turbo kit stage 2 that I bought was from Laurent Motors and cost me 1,299 euros. The fuel injectors that I used were from Bosch with a 440 ccm and cost me about 382 euros. The ECU that I used was KDFI Mega Squared Plug and Play and cost me 554 euros. The head gasket that I used was a Athena Cooper ring and cost me 246 euros. The head studs that I used were from ARP and cost me 341 euros. The radiator that I used was the Tropical Edition for the 325i from aftermarket, which you can get for 8 euros. Then the electric fan, I don't remember which brand that was, but it cost me about 100 euros. The oil cooler was a universal one with a sandwich plate, which cost me 150 euros. Then I got a transmission from the E30 325i for 250 euros and also a drive shaft from the E30 324 TD for 100 euros. But don't forget that you don't need these ones if you already have a 325i or don't want to upgrade these. I did them because my car used to be a 320i from factory. Then the overhaul kit for the gear linkage cost me 75 euros. And also I got some new water hose which cost me 150 euros. Then the clutch kit stage 2 from Sachs, which I got from Shaper Automotive, cost me 570 euros. But unfortunately you can't get this anymore. So if you wanna have some similar one, you're gonna be paying about 1000 euros now. I got some new gaskets for the engine like the valve, oil sump, etc. That ones cost me 175 euros. Then I got some new exhaust piping and silencer, which cost me about 400 euros. Then I got some simple heat shields for the turbo and the manifold, which cost me about 100 euros. Then I got some second-hand brake kit from a Porsche 996, which cost me 1000 euros. And of course there were some unexpected random small things, which cost me about 500 euros. You know, like tools and all the stuff you're gonna be needing, which you're gonna be figuring out along the way. So this was the total cost, and all of that together brought me to 6,500 euros. That was the cost that I had to spend back then just to get the car started and driving. Of course, this was not the only money that I spent. As I said, later on I spent some more money on other things, but I will show you that footage now, and then we're gonna be talking about the total cost later. So let's continue with the video. In the meantime, as you may have already heard, I bought these Porsche brakes. To get them fitted onto the car, I needed some 17-inch rims, so I decided to buy some Japan Racings, as you can see. Now we are in the timeline when I had that workshop which I mentioned in the beginning of the video. This one gave me opportunities, but took away my whole time. That's why I only had this one time in all that 6 years, which I took to make some maintenance on my E30. One thing that was needed to be done was upgrading the turbo. The one in the Laurent kit was just a 150 euro China charger. It did its job until the end, but it started losing boost pressure because the exhaust manifold was leaking and the wastegate lost its power to keep the gate closed. Oh yeah, and I never told you, but my system was designed to hold up to 1.3 bar or 20 psi of boost. And the old China turbocharger was only delivering 0.6 bar at the end before I changed it. That's why I had to upgrade to this Borg Warner S200 S6 turbocharger. And together with that I needed this new manifold from CX Racing, which had a gate for the external wastegate. What I'm basically doing here is testing if the system is leaking, because I didn't want to experience the same shit again with this new system. Now, if you wanna know why I chose this Borg Warner, the answer is pretty easy. There are some turbo calculators on the internet and this one was the best fitting my setup and goals. And also it's said to be the best in his price range. Here's a little comparison of the two turbos. You're gonna notice that the exhaust side of the Borg Warner is a lot bigger. This is because it's meant to work better on higher revs. To get rid of the heat building up in the engine bay, this time I used some thermo insulation. I did this with a MIG welder, that's why it doesn't look so beautiful. But I didn't care because my goal was to get a good function and not a good look. Now I have to say this setup looks so much more professional than the China one. I don't know if it's because of the thermo insulation, but it definitely rocks. Okay, let's start this thing up to hear the raw sound. And then I moved on building the downpipe and the wastegate. This time I used 3" going down, but connected it to the old 2.5" pipe because I was having time issues. But I can already calm you down, because right now, while I am cutting this video, I am already working on a new exhaust system. This time I also put some flexible pipes into it. The reason is obvious: launch controls. These ones are shaking up the system so hard that I thought maybe that was the reason why my old manifold started leaking so heavily. Now, to get the story right, I also did some upgrades and repairs on the car itself while I was doing this. But I didn't want to drift away from the turbo story so far, that's why I didn't talk about that stuff. Now anyways, finally the car was ready to drive again, and so we did a test drive. So to get the new turbo tested, I started with a boost pressure of 1 bar. One of the boost pipes already gave up on the first try. And yeah, I drove the car back to the shop to repair that pipe tomorrow. But instead, my car decided to surprise me with another problem. The new master clutch cylinder I had installed decided not to work anymore. So I made a quick fix by gluing this valve back on and losing about 6 hours bleeding the lines. But yeah, let's forget that. Let's continue where we left.
Oh my god!
I could already tell that the car was going much better on 1 bar of boost with this new turbo compared to the old turbo with 1.3 bar. After doing that stress test on that new system, it was time to check if everything was alright. While I did the turbo upgrade, I also had sealed up some things like the oil sump, and I was very surprised that everything looked very fine. The new thermo insulation was working very good, but now I had the problem that the heat was trapped inside the insulation. The only solution later was to go back to the visco fan. That one solved the heat problem finally forever. To stress test the visco, of course, I did some launches while standing still. Okay, let's go back to our final price list. So the final things that I needed to get this setup completely done was the new turbo of the Borg Warner for 1000 euros. Then I had to put the new manifold from CX Racing on it for 500 euros. Then the wastegate I got some from eBay for 100 euros. And then another upgrade that I did was a wasted spark setup, but I don't have that on video, so I will be doing that one for an extra one. That was an Opel Omega V6 ignition coil, which cost me 100 euros. Then I put some silicone ignition cables on that for 150 euros. And also I got some visco fan, which was aftermarket, but like the origin one for the E30 325i for 90 euros. And then I put some thermo insulation on, which I got from fmic.io for 150 euros. And then the new exhaust with the silencer from Full Car Tuning for 200 euros. So the extra cost that came later on was 2,300 euros. And this makes a complete with the old cost of 8,700 euros. But guys, I can tell you, just calculate with 10,000 euros. Don't forget that there's gonna be some inflation on the price, and also there's always something that you're gonna be missing or forgetting or your car is not having. So I would say just to get started on a stock block setup, listen, the turbo only costs 1,000 euros, but everything beside that, like all the small stuff, costs around 9,000 euros on extra. So don't underestimate this. I did it. I hope I could help you with all the details that I could share. And if you liked this video and I could help you, it would be nice if you would support me back by liking and subscribing. And if there's anything other that you want to know, just comment it. I'm always answering all the questions you guys have. I'm glad if I can help you. So thank you for joining me again and see you on the next video. Yo Furki, bye bye.